Hi everyone and welcome back. Today I wanted to go over Daniel, the second half of the book basically, and just go through some points that are in there with regards to the prophecy that he was speaking of them days and the prophecy of the end of the time, which we're about approaching into right now. So starting with the first chapter of the second half of the book, which is chapter 7. As a brief overview, this whole chapter... Where's my cursor gone? This whole chapter is an overview vision from the time of Daniel until the time the Son of Man is given dominion. So that would be circa 500 BC, roughly, from the time of Daniel. And the Ancient of Days reigning would be around the time of the rapture, around 2029. So, fiery issue stream came forth from before him, thousands ministered into him. So the thousands, as I've shown before, for example, on the table, 10,000 times 10,000 is 100 million, and then thousands of thousands. So as you can see in the first box, the Bride Escape, it's got 144 million written underneath it. So when it's talking about here, the 10,000 times 10,000, it's talking about the 100 million that are saved in the pre-tribulation escape. So the bride is the elect, I suppose, if you will, or the bride are ministering to him, and the judgment was set and the books were opened. And they'll be held because the voice of the great words which the horn spake. Now it's referring to what's happening before and after on the earth at that time. And then it goes on to the Son of Man giving dominion. So then at this point it's talking about the second coming and the millennial reign, which is obviously 7 years after. So it gives you a brief overview of time from the time of Daniel until the second coming of Christ. And at the bottom of the chapter, it gives you the vision interpretation. So looking at this, for example, it tells you that the four beasts that are spoken of are the four kingdoms. And there it even says they are four kings. But as the four kingdoms, it's talking about the four kingdoms from Daniel to now, being Greece, Persia, Rome 1 and Rome 2. And in the fourth beast has 10 horns come out of him. So in that instance, it's not referring to the kings anymore. It's talking to the beast systems in the grand view. So this is chapter 7 is a grand view, an overall plan of the time that remains from Daniel to now. So it's giving us this information, and it speaks words. And if you think about it, it was like 2,500 years ago, roughly. And it's here saying that this prophecy, the overall prophecy given to his hand, time, times, and a dividing of time. This particular one is 3.5 years, because in maths and means plus. So it was given into his hands 1 plus 2 plus 0.5, 3.5. And it says, and judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and to destroy until the end. So then there's a period of time of destruction and before the end comes as well. After the times were given into his hands. It's changed the times and laws. So now getting into chapter 8. So chapter 7 gives you an overview of the 2,500 years. And then you come into chapter 8 and it has a vision of the ram and the goat. And when you go to the bottom, once again, there's an interpretation of the vision. So in the interpretation, it tells you who the animals are. But for simple sake, I've written them down on a piece of paper. So I'll just chuck them here for now. I have to move the camera. So to keep it simple, the vision of the ram and the goat, Grecia versus Media and Persia. And as you know, earlier on in the first half of the book, the angel come to see Daniel from Warren with one of the two. Before he goes, the second one will come. So anyway, going from chapter 8 to 20, the ram having two horns, Media and Persia. Oh yeah, that's the explanation of who is what. So breaking it down from 8 verse 4, I saw Media and Persia pushing west, north and south. Then Grecia came from the west on the face of the whole earth. Grecia runs towards Media and Persia in fury. Grecia smites Media and Persia to the ground, and none can help. Grecia was great, but the first king was down. So Grecia, after this first king goes down, divides into 4 kingdoms. And a king rises from one of these 4 kingdoms. He magnifies himself by... sorry, I can't read my writing. Sorry, it's a bit early. By him... was the sacrifice removed. Truth cast down to the ground and deception prospered. Saints talking, and they speak of 2,300 days, and then the sanctuary will be cleansed. So that's looking at 8:12 and 8:13 in this instance. So you can see from this story that I've just briefly read out, which you're able to go over yourself, and I'll also just go down to them 2 verses I just mentioned. So 8:12, a host was given to him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and cast the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. So this is talking about deception, a practice of deception. Much like what we went through 3 years ago. As not saying that's what it was, but I'm saying it will be something similar, where the trial will begin, and it will be down to who do you want to be your overlord, man or God. And when speaking to another one, said to a certain saint which spake, how long shall the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation? Be mindful of the things I say, because I'm going to bring up a list in a minute of things that have to occur in order for this vision to take place. And he said unto me, 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So he said, what he asked up here was, how long shall the vision of the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation to give the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? 2,300 days. So, excuse me. So here it's telling you as well. It came to pass to Daniel saw a vision. So this prophecy, up until this point, had taken place in the past. And I hear of people on their channels calling me crazy or a preterist. You can call me names if you like. I don't think God would like his people calling his other people names. We're supposed to be getting along, but anyway, 2,300 days to cleansing. And then here comes the interpretation, which in itself seems like another vision. And ultimately what it's saying here is Greece takes over, and Greece starts overcoming Persia and Media and starting butting the rest of the world as well. But this is all more about a war between nations. This is the 7 years of seals. The first 7 years. Grecia being stronger and knocking down the 2 horns, which is Media and Persia, so that none can help them. Excuse me. So then it's talking about at the latter time the kingdom of the transgressors will come to the fall, the kingdom of fierce countenance and understanding and dark sentences shall stand up. So what we know is there'll be a period of time where all this war between Grecia, Media and Persia is taking place. It has taken place in the past between the transformation of the beast kingdoms, but it's now going to take place in the end of times. And in the past it took place in years and weeks of years, and in the end of times now it's going to be taking place in years and days. So in this instance, 2,300 will be the days, but the years will be the 70 weeks of years. So this point in time is talking about Grisha preparing, the world having war, the top 7 years there. And then when you go to chapter 9, there is Daniel's prayer for his people. So in this chapter, it's talking about Jerusalem. It's not talking about Grisha, Media, or Persia, or the rest of the nations of the Western world going to war with one another. This is Daniel, after seeing the world going through that, turning his head to God and praying for his people. So this prophecy in this chapter is referring to Jerusalem. So I did my last video, or 1 or 2 videos back, I can't quite remember. I did go through this chapter and explain it, that in the olden times, the weeks of years, the weeks were his year. Excuse me. The weeks were years, weeks of years. So a week would be 7 years, and the end of time, which is now, it would be the 70 weeks would be 70 years, which is 70 festivals of weeks. This bit down here. So when it talks about a 7-year covenant, it's talking about a 1-year covenant, not 7 years, like most people believe. It's like when you do maths, if you are to do algebra calculations and keep it homogeneous, if you change one unit of one particular thing in the equation, you have to change everything to be homogeneous with itself. Otherwise, the equation can't take place. So if you change one part of the prophecy from days to years, then you have to change all of the other applicable parts of the equation from days to years as well. So where people talk of this prophecy with a gap of 2,000 years in between, they'll say the first half is talking about weeks of years. The second half is talking about just 1 week, which is one set of 7 years. But then when you go through these things, you'll notice that the timings are completely off, which I'll show in a sec. So going past this, I have spoken of this chapter before, so I'll just go on to the next one for now. Chapter 10 now goes through the second half. So the second half, the first half was about the Gentiles and fulfilling their time. So yes, they will be trampling Israel and Jerusalem underfoot during the World War and such, whilst the Jewish people are spread out from the land, given time for the land to rest before millennial reign can begin and all sorts. But the next chapters I'm talking about now are the second set of 7 years, the Great Tribulation, after the church has been raptured. And God turns his head back to the Jews. And if you go through this, I didn't do what I did before like this, because this is not talking about the ram and the goat anymore. It's still talking about, at first, the same nations, Grecia, Media and Persia, but it's a different story. This is not the story that I've just read in chapter 8. This is ultimately the retaliation, and this is the time after. So if you look at what I've explained so far, from chapter 7 to here and now chapter 10, it's a chronological order. It's going in order in time. So what happened was the first 7 years took place. Then Daniel prayed for his people at the time of the rapture. So in that prophecy, it talks about a time where the Messiah is cut off. That would be after the rapture has taken place, because at that point in time, these 7 years, the only people that are going to be left on earth that believe or have faith in Christ are the 144,000, because they would have been sealed by the Lord. So that's what that portion of time is talking about. And if you go through these and compare this chapter to chapter 8, you can see they're totally different. It talks about the 4 kingdoms that come from the first king of Greece dying. and his kingdom being split up, and then the king of the south of Grecia being the little horn. And this goes into the second half and the details of what happens in the world after the rapture. And just going into it quickly, then said that fear not, peace be strong to thee, yea, strong, and you have spoken and strengthened. He said, Lord, speak, for you have strengthened me. And said, He knowest when I come unto thee. And now I will return to fight with the prince of Persia, and then when I go forth, the prince of Grecia shall come. So it's talking about the end of that beast, the first beast of the 4 beasts of Daniel, and then the next beast before Rome, and then the current one. But in the end of times understanding, this is talking about 4 kingdoms, because it's an octave, or it's a different Fibonacci size of the prophecy of the past. And here's the story of what happens and how things go about for that second 7 years. Because bear in mind, after the church have gone, so the pre-trib escape that happens imminently is those that are in Christ now, that are actively teaching, preaching, and living in the way that God finds pleasing, which would all involve faithfulness. And then in the rapture in 2029, all the people that wake up during, or go to sleep, if you will, into the earth, during that time, those that find Christ in that time will be raptured, and they will go to paradise. So the ones that first, the pre-trib, they go to the heaven, the second heaven, the third heaven even, and they go and replace the fallen angels, not as angels, but like angels, like Christ. And then in the rapture, the 1.5 billion odd souls that are raptured will go to paradise, and they will have bodies like Adam. And bear in mind, the only people in Revelation that are spoken of not dying of the second death are the Smyrna martyrs. They're the ones that will come and rule and reign with Christ on earth for the millennial reign. And then at the end of the millennial reign, they will go back to heaven with Christ, when the 8th day and the great age takes place, that is. So here we're talking about, here the chapter is talking about the final fight, the abomination of desolation. It talks about his arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they place the abomination that maketh desolate. So I've got a list here, as I said before, and I'm going to show it in 2 different versions, that in a 7-year version and a 14-year version. I can't even entertain any kind of tribulation that's less than 7 years, because I'll explain it when I go through it. So this here is talking about the climate change God, which will still be believed in the second half of the 14-year tribulation, because that's after the rapture is when a lot of the so-called natural disasters that the unbelieving world will talk of or experience will be the wrath of God and the first 4 trumpets in 2030. And talks about even until his destruction in the end. And then when you go to this last chapter, it talks about the time of the end. So this is now talking about the final couple of years, and Michael the Prince shall stand up and defend his people, fighting Satan. Excuse me. And it says here, the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swore by him that liveth forever, it shall be for a time, times and a half. So as I said before, and equals plus in mathematics. So here we've got it shall be for a time. So this is saying 1, 2, and add 0.5. So it's not saying 3.5 here. It's saying this shall be for a year, 2 years and a half. So he's not plus in the first year to the times and half a time. So this is a little mystery in itself. and when he shall live, has accomplished, scattered the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. So the 3.5 year portion, as everyone I think knows, is the first 3.5 years of their 7-year tribulation that they speak of in the 7-year understanding. But here, this is talking about a 2.5 year period, which I'll show you in a sec. Now, if we go down here, we see from the time of daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate set up is 1290 days. There shall be 1,290 days. This is a period of time. Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the period of time. These are two different periods of times. This isn't saying there's going to be 1,290 days of tribulation and then 45 days later you're blessed. And I'll show you exactly how and why in a sec. But this is actually talking about two separate periods of time. Otherwise, because this is the 1,335, this is the 1,335 days, yeah. Go thy way to the end, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy light in the end of days. So, going through, when you look at this in the 7-year understanding, this is the list of things that you need to take place in order for the prophecy to be fulfilled. You need the 7-year covenant, which is what the 7-year tribbles believe begins, the rapture of the church, and the 7-year tribulation. Excuse me. I just want to quickly say the reason I love everyone. I don't want anyone to not be saved. But the reason I keep talking about people not talking about this upcoming event being the rapture is not because I don't want people talking about the rapture. It's because it's not the rapture. It's not the snatching away, but it's the escape of the elect. And if all the famous or all the popular Christian videos are talking about the rapture and then the event of the escape takes place, there's going to be so many people that will lose hope during the times of tribulation, that won't put their faith in Christ because they will believe the error that the rapture had taken place, and they won't know that the rapture is soon to come in a few years from now for them. So the way I see it is people talking about things in error. It's not an issue now, but when the tribulation begins, it will be an issue for a lot of people, and it's in my opinion, it's not fair. These people need to have hope and something to put their faith into, and the rapture and paradise is that, considering that those that do go beforehand won't be that group, but they'll be the group going to heaven. So that's why I keep trying to push people to try and get this understanding, so more people will be saved after the pre-trib escape people are taking out. So this is the 7-year, this is the list of things that need to take place. The 7-year covenant, the sacrifice removed, the abomination set up, the abomination takes place, the sanctuary and host trodden underfoot, the sanctuary cleansed, the 1-year covenant, which people in 7-year understanding don't even believe, and then blessed is he who waits to the 1,335 days. So here is the verses for them as well, according to the 7-year understanding. But chapter 7 is talking about time and times and the dividing of time, which is 3.5 years, which I mentioned before. So when we look at this in a length of time on a table, this is the 7-year understanding. Daniel chapter 8, the ram and the goat are butting against each other, going to war. Then the 7-year covenant begins. It only lasts for 3.5 years, 1,277.5-ish days. Then the sacrifice is removed. Then there's 1,290 days till the abomination is set up. Excuse me. And in that last 45 days, all the other things are going to take place. The abomination takes place, the sanctuary and host trodden underfoot, sanctuary cleansed, 1-year covenant, and blessed is he. So all them things will apparently happen in the last 45 days. But all the rest of it will take just over 7 years. It's not even under 7 years. It's actually, with the 45 days, it's a total of 7.2 years. So it wouldn't even fit into a sabbatical cycle. According to the 7-year understanding, it's too long, which means unless the sabbatical cycle happens 0.2 years after the rapture, then I'm pretty sure it just the new sabbatical cycle happened last year even. So that would mean, technically speaking, this couldn't even happen for the next 7 years anyway, to be able to fulfill in the time span prophesied. Excuse me. So that's the 7-year understanding. It doesn't fit, doesn't work, and it squashes 2/3 of the prophecy into 45 days and leaves the rest expanded out. So now I'm going to show you in the 14-year understanding. So we've got the 7-year covenant, which people begin it with, being the 3.5 years. I'll put that on. That would be Daniel 9:27 in the 7-year understanding, but in my understanding, that's the Daniel chapter 8 that this begins with, Daniel 8, talking about the war of Grecia and Persia and that. And then you've got the sacrifice removed and the 1290 days till the abomination set up. Then you're told in Revelation 8, in Daniel 8:13, from the sacrifice removed till the sanctuary cleansed is 2,300 days. And we're also told that blessed is he who waits after the abomination is set up 1,335 days until the person that waits that long. So in between, what we have is all the other things in the list that I've just mentioned. I'll put them down here as well. So you have the list of things. So as I say, the 7-year covenant, I actually said chapter 8 before, but I'm actually referring to chapter 7 verse 25 for that 3.5 years, which is before the rapture on the 14-year thing. So the 3.5 years would be seal 5-ish onwards, or maybe even the end of World War III. So the excuse me, this World War III is Daniel chapter 7, and then it's talking about the 3.5 years, times and half a time. Then the rapture takes place, the Messiah's cut off like in Daniel chapter 9. Then this is the final week that everyone in the 7-year understanding refers to, that Daniel's talking about. But as I mentioned, the week is 1 year. It's not 7 years. The 7 years was fulfilled back in the day. Oh, sorry. So when you look at these day counts, in that list of things is these lists of things here, is that list in order, because you can't have the abomination take place before the abomination set up. So it has to go in the order. When you go through prophecy, you'll see that these are the list of things that need to take place. They're the time spans that are openly and obviously given to us. And with these, we can calculate. So 2,300 days minus 1,290 days means that the rest of that time from here to here is 1,010 days. So you've got the 3.5 years, the 1,290 days, the 1,010 days, and then with this, now we know that this period of time, how many days this is, we can work out the top one, the 1,335. So from the abomination being set up to blessed is he, 1,335 days. This portion here is 1,010 days. So we know that this final portion is 325 days. So this first prophecy says from the time the sacrifice is removed and the sanctuary and host have been trodden underfoot and the sanctuary is cleansed is 2,300 days. Excuse me. As soon as the sanctuary is cleansed, then the covenant can begin with Christ, the 1-year covenant. And after 6, when here is the 325 days. I know a year is 365, but the covenant gets broken halfway through anyway, so it doesn't need to be a full year remaining for the prophecy, this particular thing, to be fulfilled, because the prophecy is halfway through the year. So when you take these into account, all this time span, and you add up all them days, you end up with 10.7 years. And when you look at the 14-year tribulation, you can count back with 2037, the box that's missing on the very bottom end here. You can count back from the millennial reign's beginning 10.7 years, and it takes you to the end of 2025, the beginning of 2026. Excuse me. And looking at this down here on the list, I put dates down, and I noticed that nowhere in Daniel can you actually get lengths of times for a couple of these points: the abomination taking place and the sanctuary and the host being trodden underfoot. But please do go and research these things, because you understand that each of these things need time around them for the host to trod the sanctuary underfoot. Do you know what I mean? Another thing as well is when John in Revelation is told to go and count, take a reed and count within the temple, but leave without the temple, because that's given to the host to be trodden underfoot. That is talking about the final 7 years, and those that are in the temple are the 144,000, and they will be in there whilst the two witnesses are performing their prophesying, days of prophesy for that portion there. And then after the two witnesses are killed, then it's about the Lamb and 144,000. Excuse me. So here's where it's quite fascinating. Is there's the 3.5 years there that begins it off on the list, as we was talking about, and the gap in the middle that's missing is 2.5 years. So this is the hidden mystery that I was telling you about before. By not adding the "and" to the time, times and a half in Daniel 12, chapter 12, verse 7, this is the mystery that's the reason that it's ambiguous and people so easily be able to squash these 14 years into 7, and some people somehow even into 3.5 years or even less. But as I've explained and shown clearly with Revelation, Daniel, the second half of Daniel, is in order, except for chapter 9. It's talking about the final time. It's talking about the 70 years of Jerusalem, but it's basically in a story, it's the splitting of time. So it's showing you up until the rapture, it was about the world, and then after the rapture, it's about Israel. But those that were in the first half are still here. Obviously, they didn't get raptured. They're the wicked ones. So they're still here, and it takes place again in a conclusion of the first 7 years. It will take place during the second 7 years. So I hope that makes sense, because it's really clear to me. And when I hear other people talking about how this means that and the other, and when you go through it with a fine comb, you see that no, not at all. And people are welcome to say what they want. If you want to use your time and your channel or your opportunity to speak to people, to put others down, or to say what you want, that is your choice. But I just want the word of God to be known by everyone, and nothing against the traditional beliefs, but when I go through things, I just find contradiction after contradiction. And when you look at it in this understanding, the contradictions fade away. The creases are ironed out. So I hope that makes sense. And if anyone's got any questions or anything they want to say, please do let me know, and I'll be happy to respond. Take care and God bless.